The light blue of Anfen's prairie dress was the color of a faded summer sky, a stark contrast to the rich, dark soil under the trestle tables. She moved with a quiet efficiency that made her nearly invisible, her focus entirely on the wedding feast she had spent 3 days preparing. In the town of Redemption, Nevada, a wedding for the mayor's daughter was the grandest event of the year, and Anfen was only the cook. She ladled fragrant beef stew into bowls, her hands steady, her face a calm mask that betrayed none of the weariness in her bones. The murmur of the crowd, the scrape of forks on tin plates, the boastful laughter of Mayor Thompson, it was all a distant hum. Silas Croft, the groom, sat at the head table, a man carved from the same stubborn rock as the surrounding mountains. He was a rancher with a sprawling claim north of town, a man whose prosperity was the subject of much speculation and envy. Next to him, Beatrice Thompson, the bride, preened in a dress of white lace that must have cost more than Anfen's entire tiny cabin. Her laughter was high and brittle, a sound that set Anfen's teeth on edge. Anfen had seen Silas in town before. He was a quiet man, one who came to her small back-door kitchen on occasion for a bowl of noodle soup, a taste of the life he'd left behind in California. He never said much, but his eyes, the color of worn denim, always held a surprising gentleness. He would sit on the crate by her door, eat his soup, and thank her with a quiet nod, leaving a coin that was always more than fair. She thought nothing of it. He was a customer, a fleeting moment of peace in her solitary life as a widow. But tonight he was the groom in a union that would secure the mayor's influence and solidify Silas's place in Redemption's hierarchy.
And Finn moved along the line of guests, refilling a water pitcher here, offering another slice of her honey-sweetened cornbread there. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and deep purple, casting long shadows across the dusty clearing where the town had gathered. She was just turning back toward her cooking fire when a sudden silence fell over the tables. The scrape of a chair leg against hard-packed earth was unnaturally loud. And Finn looked up. Silas Croft was on his feet. His face was grim, his jaw set. He wasn't looking at his bride. He was looking directly across the crowd, his gaze finding and holding hers. Beatrice tugged at his sleeve, her smile faltering. "Silas, what is it? Is it time for your speech?" He ignored her. The whole town was watching, forks frozen halfway to their mouths. Mayor Thompson's jovial expression hardened into a confused scowl. "I have something to say." Silas's voice was low but carried in the stillness. It was the voice he used when calming a spooked horse, steady and sure. "There's been a mistake." A nervous titter went through the crowd. The mayor started to rise, a warning glint in his eye. "Now, son, if this is some kind of joke—" "It's no joke," Silas said, his eyes never leaving Anfen's. She stood paralyzed, a heavy stoneware pitcher clutched in her hands. The water inside seemed to grow impossibly heavy. She felt 100 pairs of eyes turn to her, the invisible cook suddenly made blindingly visible. The blue of her dress felt like a beacon. "I can't marry your daughter, Mayor," Silas stated, the words dropping like stones into a silent well. A collective gasp swept through the guests. Beatrice's face crumpled, her painted smile dissolving into a mask of disbelief and horror. "What in God's name are you talking about, Croft?" the mayor boomed, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. But Silas was already moving. He walked away from the head table, away from his stunned bride and her apoplectic father. He moved through the parted crowd like a man wading through a river, his purpose clear and unwavering. He stopped directly in front of Anfen. The scent of pine and clean sweat clung to him, a stark contrast to the cooking smells of her work. He was taller up close than she'd realized, and the setting sun caught the lines of concern etched around his eyes. He said nothing to her, not at first. He simply reached out and gently took the heavy pitcher from her hands, setting it on the nearest table. His touch was brief, but a current of warmth shot up her arm. Then he faced the crowd, his hand protectively hovering near her shoulder. "I asked the wrong woman," Silas announced, his voice ringing with a conviction that defied argument.
I'm asking the right one now." He turned his head slightly, his gaze softening as it met hers. "An Fen, Mrs. Chen, will you marry me?" The world tilted.
The sounds of the crowd, the mayor's sputtering rage, Beatrice's first choked sob, it all faded into a roaring in her ears. This was impossible, a dream, a cruel joke played by a man she barely knew. She was a Chinese widow, a woman who lived on the fringes of this town, valued only for her labor. He was Silas Croft, the landowner, the prize. People like him did not see people like her. Yet he was standing here in front of everyone, offering her not a bowl of soup, but his name, his life. Her mouth was dry. She could only stare at him, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The silence stretched, thick with scandal and disbelief. Mayor Thompson finally found his voice, a roar of pure fury. "You've lost your mind, Croft. You will not humiliate my daughter, my family like this. This wedding will proceed." Two burly men, cronies of the mayor who served as the town's unofficial enforcers, began to move toward Silas. Silas didn't flinch.
He kept his eyes on An Fen, waiting for an answer she did not have. He had thrown a torch into the middle of his own life, and into hers. But in his eyes, she did not see madness. She saw a desperate, calculated plea. What he found in the barn that night would change everything by morning. It was a look that asked for more than her hand. It asked for her trust. The mayor's men were closing in, their faces grim. The festive wedding feast was about to become a brawl. Silas gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a silent message for her not to be afraid. But fear was a cold knot in her stomach. He had made his choice in front of everyone. Now she had to make hers. "Seize him!" Mayor Thompson bellowed, his face purple with rage. The two men lunged. Silas moved with a speed that belied his size. He didn't draw the pistol at his hip. Instead, he sidestepped the first man, using the man's own momentum to send him stumbling into a table laden with pies.
The second man reached for him, but Silas simply raised a hand, firm and placating. "Hold on, Jeb," he said, his voice calm. "This is between me and the mayor. Don't you go getting involved in something that isn't your business." Jeb, a stout man who ran the freight office, hesitated. He looked from Silas's steady gaze to the mayor's furious face, and then to the shocked townspeople. He was on the mayor's payroll, but he was also a man who understood the unspoken laws of the frontier. A man's choice of wife was his own, however scandalous.
"He's making a mockery of this town," Thompson shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Silas. "A mockery of my Beatrice." Silas turned to face him fully, positioning himself so he still stood between An Fen and the crowd. "The only mockery here, Mayor, would be a marriage built on a lie. I won't do it, not to your daughter, and not to myself." "A lie?" the mayor spat. "We had an agreement, a contract." The word contract hung in the air, heavy and significant. An Fen saw a flicker of understanding in the eyes of some of the older ranchers in the crowd. This was about more than a wedding. This was about land, or water, or money. Silas's gaze flickered to An Fen, a silent apology in his eyes for drawing her into this.
"Our agreement was based on certain understandings," Silas said carefully. "Understandings I now see were mistaken." He looked past the mayor, toward the preacher who stood near the makeshift altar, his Bible held limply in his hand. "Reverend, I apologize for this disruption, but I meant what I said." He turned back to An Fen. The chaos seemed to create a small pocket of silence just for them. "An Fen," he said again, his voice softer now, meant only for her. "I know this is sudden. I know I have no right to ask it, but I am asking. I need a wife, and I want that wife to be you." His honesty was as shocking as his public proposal. He wasn't declaring undying love. He was stating a need, a stark, unvarnished truth. It was the same directness he had when he came for her soup, a plainness she understood far better than the flowery, false words of courtship. He needed a wife, and for reasons she couldn't fathom, he had chosen her.
She looked at her hands, calloused from years of kneading dough and scrubbing pots. She looked at her worn blue dress, the best thing she owned. Then she looked at the mayor, a man who had only ever spoken to her to complain that her prices were too high. She looked at Beatrice, who was now weeping in her mother's arms, a victim not of Silas's rejection, but of her father's ambition. And finally, she looked back at Silas. He was waiting, his posture relaxed but ready, a man who had made his stand and would not be moved. He was offering her a chance to be something other than the town's Chinese cook. He was offering her a name, a home, and, she suspected, a fight. Taking a slow, deep breath, Anfen gave a single, deliberate nod. The word was not spoken, but it was understood. A wave of murmurs washed over the crowd. Silas's shoulders relaxed in a barely perceptible sigh of relief. He offered her his arm. After a moment's hesitation, she wiped her palms on her dress and rested her hand on his forearm. The fabric of his coat was sturdy, the muscle beneath it solid as oak. "This is not over, Croft," the mayor snarled, his voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this day. I'll see you ruined. I'll see you run out of this territory on a rail." "You can try," Silas said evenly. "Reverend, if you'll still officiate, Mrs. Chen and I would like to be married." The preacher, a timid man named Miller, looked helplessly toward the mayor. "You will do no such thing," Thompson commanded. "The law says a man of God can marry any two consenting adults who wish to be wed," Silas countered, his voice firm. "And we consent, don't we, Anfen?" He looked down at her, and for the first time, a small, genuine smile touched his lips. It transformed his face, chasing away the grim lines. In that moment, Anfen felt a flicker of something more than just survival. It was a spark of defiance. She, who had spent her life making herself small and unnoticeable, was now the center of the biggest scandal Redemption had ever seen. She lifted her chin. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and surprisingly strong. "We do." The word, spoken aloud, sealed it. The mayor looked as if he might burst. Beatrice let out a theatrical wail and fled. The wedding guests, caught between the spectacle and their loyalty to the mayor, began to shift uncomfortably. Silas led Anfen toward the simple wooden altar, leaving a wake of chaos behind them. The wedding feast was over. A different, far more dangerous future had just begun. But as she walked beside this strange, resolute cowboy, Anfen felt a sense of rightness that she hadn't felt in a very long time. What he was hiding was not a secret love, but a secret war. The ceremony was a blur. Reverend Miller, sweating under the mayor's murderous glare, rushed through the words as if fearing fire from the heavens. And Fenn's responses were quiet. Silas's were firm. There was no ring, there were no flowery vows. It was a stark, legal transaction conducted in the ruin of another wedding. When the Reverend finally pronounced them man and wife, the silence from the remaining guests was deafening. Silas did not kiss her. He simply took her hand, his large, warm palm enclosing hers. "Let's go home," he said. He led her to his wagon, which was hitched near the edge of the clearing. He helped her onto the seat with a gentle hand at her elbow, then untied the reins and climbed up beside her. He didn't look back at the shambles of the wedding feast, at the furious mayor, or at the gossiping town. He just clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward, pulling them away from the lights and into the growing dark. They rode in silence for a long time, the only sounds the rhythmic clopping of hooves and the creak of the wagon wheels. The town of Redemption fell away behind them, a small cluster of angry lights in the vast dark prairie. Anfen sat straight-backed, her hands folded in her lap, her mind a whirlwind. She was married, to a man she barely knew, a man who had a powerful enemy. Finally, as they crested a small rise and the lights of his ranch appeared in the distance, Silas spoke. "I owe you an explanation." "Yes," she said simply. "I'm sorry for doing it like that," he said, his eyes on the road ahead. "It wasn't fair to you, but I was out of time." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Mayor Thompson doesn't just want a son-in-law. He wants my land. My homestead claim is conditional. I have to make significant improvements and prove residency for 5 years. The deadline for the final filing is in 2 days. The law favors a married man. It makes the claim more secure, harder to challenge. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket and handed it to her. It was a telegraph message, the paper creased and soft from handling. In the faint moonlight, she could make out the words, "Challenge filed. Final proof of claim due. Land Office, Carson City." "Thompson filed a legal challenge against my claim," Silas explained. "He's arguing I haven't met the residency requirements. He has friends in the territorial government. He planned to have the marriage, then use his connection to me to invalidate my claim and take the land for himself. Beatrice was just the price of the deal. Marrying her would have been like handing him the deed." Anfen looked from the paper to his face. The grim lines were back. "So you needed a wife? Any wife?" "No," he said, and his intensity surprised her. He turned on the seat to face her more directly. "Not any wife. I needed a partner. Someone with grit. Someone who knows what it's like to stand alone." He looked down at his hands on the reins. "I've seen you, Anfen. I've seen you run your business, deal with drunks and cheapskates. I've seen you hold your head high when folks whisper their ignorance. I saw you carry on after your husband died, building a life from nothing. I didn't choose you because you were convenient. I chose you because I respect you. I figured a woman like you wouldn't break, no matter what Thompson threw at us." His words settled in her heart, a strange and welcome warmth. He hadn't seen an exotic curiosity or a lowly servant. He had seen her strength, her resilience.
"It is a great risk you ask me to take," she said quietly. "Mayor Thompson is a powerful man." "I know," Silas said, "and I won't lie to you. This is a business arrangement, a partnership. The ranch, this land, if we can hold it, half of it is yours. Your name will be on the deed right next to mine. You'll have a home, security. You'll never have to depend on the charity of this town again. In return, I need you to be my wife, in name, in public, to stand with me against Thompson." They reached the ranch house, a simple but sturdy clapboard structure with a wide porch. A lamp burned in the window, casting a welcoming yellow glow. It was a real house, a home. "And in private?" she asked, the question hanging between them. Silas stopped the wagon and set the brake. He was silent for a long moment, looking at the house. "This is your home now, Anfen. You will have your own room, your own space. I will not expect anything from you that you do not freely offer. I give you my word on that." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands gentle on her waist. They stood on the dusty ground in front of their home, two near strangers bound together by a desperate act. The risk was immense, the future uncertain. But as she looked at the steady resolve in his eyes, Anfen understood. This was not about romance. It was about survival. And for the first time since her husband had passed, she was not facing it alone. "All right, Silas Croft," she said, her voice steady. "We have a deal." The next morning, the war began. The sheriff, a man named Blevins, whose loyalty to the mayor was an open secret, rode out to the ranch before the sun had fully risen. He carried a notice of eviction, a flimsy legal document claiming Silas's original survey was invalid. Silas met him on the porch, a cup of coffee in one hand. Anfen stood just inside the doorway, watching. She had been up for an hour, the unfamiliar kitchen slowly yielding its secrets to her. "Morning, Blevins," Silas said calmly. "That's a long ride to take so early." "Got an order here for you, Croft," the sheriff said, avoiding his eyes. "Says you're trespassing on territorial land. You've got 24 hours to vacate." Silas took the paper and glanced at it before letting it drop to the porch floor. "This isn't worth the paper it's printed on, and you know it. My claim is sound.
And as of last night, it's the claim of a married man. My wife and I will be staying." He gestured with his head toward the doorway. An Fin stepped out onto the porch, her hands clasped in front of her.
She wore the same blue dress, now her wedding dress, and her expression was as calm and unreadable as Silas's. The sheriff's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. The whole town knew what had happened, but seeing them together, standing on this porch as a united front, was another matter entirely. It made the situation real. That don't change the order," Blevins stammered. "It changes everything," Silas said. "Now you can ride back to town and tell the mayor his little scare tactic didn't work. Or you can try to enforce that piece of paper and see how that goes." He didn't raise his voice, but the threat was unmistakable. Blevins hesitated, his hand hovering near the butt of his pistol. He looked at Silas, then at An Fin, then back at Silas. He was a bully, not a fighter. He crumpled, turning his horse without another word and riding away in a cloud of dust. When he was gone, Silas let out a long breath. "That was the first shot." He turned to An Fin. "You were good. You didn't even flinch." "I have had men like him try to cheat me at my own kitchen door," she said. "His threats are no different." A slow smile spread across Silas's face. "No," he said, "I suppose they're not." The next 3 months were a siege. Mayor Thompson cut off Silas's credit at the general store. He tried to file a lien against the ranch for phantom debts. He spread vicious rumors in town about both of them. But they held on. An Fin's shrewd management of their supplies, learned from years of making something from nothing, stretched their resources further than Silas had thought possible. He taught her about the land, about the rhythm of the seasons on a ranch. She taught him how to make his stark house feel like a home, filling it with the scent of baking bread and the quiet order she created wherever she went.
They worked side by side, building a new fence for the south pasture, digging a deeper well before the dry season hit, and reinforcing the barn roof. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, speaking little, but sharing a comfortable silence. He would watch her hands as she mended his shirts, struck by their competence. She would watch the way the setting sun softened the hard lines of his face, revealing a kindness he tried to hide. The partnership, forged in desperation, was slowly, quietly, becoming something more. One evening, a letter arrived, carried by the circuit mail rider. It was from the Territorial Land Office in Carson City. Silas opened it with hands that were not quite steady. An Fin stood beside him, watching his face. He read it, then read it again. A slow smile, one of genuine, unburdened relief, spread across his face. He looked at her, his eyes shining.
"We won," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thompson's challenge was dismissed. The deed is ours, final, unconditional." He held the letter out to her. "It's ours, An Fin." She took the letter, her fingers brushing his. The official paper felt solid, real. It was a deed not just to a piece of land, but to a future. She looked up at him, and the wall that had stood between them, the careful boundary of their business arrangement, finally crumbled. He reached out, his callous thumb gently tracing the line of her jaw. "I told you this was a business deal," he said softly. "I was wrong. Or maybe I was just lying to myself." "A partnership," she corrected, her voice barely a whisper. "More than that," he said. "For me, it's become more than that." He didn't press, didn't demand. He simply stated his truth and waited, just as he had at the wedding. An Fin thought of the lonely years behind her and the shared work of the past few months. She thought of his quiet respect, his unwavering defense of her, of them. He hadn't just given her a home, he had given her a place to belong. She leaned into his touch, a silent surrender and an acceptance all at once. "For me too, Silas," she confessed. He lowered his head and kissed her. not with the fire of a desperate man, but with the slow, deep tenderness of a man who had finally come home. The taste of him was coffee and dust and sunlight, the taste of her new life. Months later, as the first snows of winter dusted the high peaks, An Fin stood on the porch, wrapped in a warm wool shawl Silas had bought for her on a trip to Carson City. The ranch was thriving. Their small herd was healthy, the barn was full of hay, and the house was snug and warm. Mayor Thompson was a diminished figure in town, his failed scheme against Silas having cost him much of his political capital and respect.
Silas came to stand beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders and pulling her close. "Getting cold," he said. "Yes," she agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. Her gaze fell upon a small, potted flower on the porch rail, its delicate blue petals a fragile defiance against the coming winter. She had grown it from a seed, nurturing it just as this strange, unexpected life had nurtured her. It was the color of a faded summer sky, the color of a wedding dress that had started it all. She realized then that love wasn't a grand declaration made in front of a crowd. It was a quiet thing, built day by day, like a sturdy ranch house, strong enough to withstand any storm. It was the safety she felt standing here in the arms of the cowboy who had chosen her, not as a convenience, but as his true and equal partner.